Welcome back to Magic Hour, everyone. I am your host, Taylor Page.
I'm Claire. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
This is such a special episode of Magic Hour podcast because it is our 1 year anniversary. So, golf claps all around. Thank you all so much for being a part of the Hummingbird community. It's been so amazing to see how the podcast has grown. Thank you, Claire, for everything you do and for being on this journey with me. Thank you to our editor, Ashley. Thank you to our graphic designer, Eva. Just such a dream team. And I'm so grateful.
Me too. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. I remember when you called me and I was in this moment of just being like, oh my God, I need to figure something else out for work. And it was like the next day, you're like, I have this idea and I want you to be a part of it. And it's just been such a beautiful thing. And I was thinking about it the other day. Like this last year was a really challenging year for me. And it's like this kind of beautiful juxtaposition that through that time we were creating this. It just was really special to think about that, like, even in a moment of like darkness or pain, you can also be creating something really beautiful. Like, one doesn't need to exist without the other necessarily. And no matter what you're going through, there's always space for something beautiful and magical to coexist.
I love that. And sometimes they coexist because of each other as well. Like if we weren't in such a heavy transformative time, we wouldn't be pushed to open up, to explore, to create, to heal. So I think it's really interesting because one of my friends is a trans woman and she was posting on her stories like, I wish as a performer and a creator and an actor that my dream could be to just be in a regular production or to be on Broadway. But like right now, it feels like it's this moment where my dream needs to be just literally to like survive and exist in this world. And, you know, in a past time, I wouldn't have had all this mental drain on me to just survive and feel accepted and not scared in my body. I could focus on actually achieving my dreams and my art and my creation. And I wrote to her on Instagram and I said, actually, it's these times of adversity and chaos and fear that are going to contribute to your light and your creativity that you shine in this world. It's not going to be in spite of it. So it's like the exact circumstances that feel so oppressive and can make us feel like there's no hope are actually setting the stage for miracles and for our creation to be met. Like there's never been more of an important time for that creation.
Yes, that's so well put. And, I think as artists, like we have the drive to make our art because it feels so good. And also, I think part of the aim of an artist is to like positively impact the world, to give someone else a feeling like, oh, I recognize that experience as one of my own and I feel seen and I feel safe. And so, for a person, like a trans person in this world who is actively feeling that oppression, that art that comes out of that will help so many people feel seen and accepted and validated in their experience. So it's almost like an even greater gift that will come out of that creativity, even though it feels awful in this moment, I'm sure. And, for all of us that are struggling right now, it's so painful. But I think, oh my God, how many songs or movies that you listen to that you're like, "Oh, they get how I feel, they get my pain," and to me, that's, like, the highest aim of an artist, like, to have someone else feel seen because of what you created, so I think I know who you're talking about, and I know that they are gonna make some powerful, powerful art out of this.
Yeah, and they already are shining their light in such a beautiful way. But what was coming up to me as you were speaking is this idea of like they only fear witches because that means that they believe in magic. Why would they fear witches and try to oppress witches if they didn't believe magic was real? And so I think that's true of all of these marginalized communities that are being oppressed. It's like they fear you because they clearly believe that there's some sort of power there that they're repressing in themselves. And like the witch, the trans person, the person of color, whoever is getting the hate is a symbol of some part of that person who's in a fearful, scarcity based, hateful consciousness, repressing that freedom, that creation, that authenticity, that power within themselves. So it doesn't feel comfortable to watch somebody living their power, their authenticity, their truth, their community.
Yes, I think that is so, so true. And I think that's why the LGBTQ community and gender nonconforming people, trans people pose such a threat because they're people living their absolute truth, even in the face of not being accepted. They're saying, this is me. Whether or not you like it, I'm going to be this free version of me. And of course, a free human is much harder to control and oppress. And so I absolutely think that's true. I often think that about women. It's like they fear us because they know how powerful we are. And so they don't want our power because our power will be an affront to their control. So they're trying to keep us down and not allow us to be our individual free humans. That is like the best way in some ways that we can be like an affront to the regime is to be our freest, most vibrant selves, even in the face of them trying to tell us no or trying to oppress us.
Yeah, and that goes right back to healing the witch wound, that fear of being anything outside the status quo that they say is permissible. And it's so powerful to stand in our power, authenticity, and magic and shine our light because it does threaten the powers that be that want us to fall in line and stay small to be safe. So, yeah, golf claps to everybody that are standing in their authentic truth and power and magic, and we're all in this together. Going back to the 1 year anniversary of Magic Hour podcast, it is an eclipse baby, which I love that Magic Hour podcast was born during eclipse season. And we actually have a testimonial to play from our latest giveaway winner. So if you aren't aware, if you send in a screenshot of your 5-star review or share us on your Instagram and tag us and send us a screenshot of that, we enter you to win an angel/mediumship reading with me. We've had 3 giveaways now, and they've all been extremely special. And the third giveaway actually was so synchronistic because it was for Mandy, who does the music on this podcast. So she entered and reviewed and got drawn, and it was so amazing to connect with her. And so, that being said, if you love Magic Hour, if you want to support us, if you want us to be here for many years to come, your reviews, your sharing of the pod, your writing in with listener questions and stories, all of that really helps us to grow and sustain this project.
Yeah, so email that into contact@magichourpod.com. And if you review us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and a screenshot and share on Instagram, you'll get entered 3 times. And I just love the synchronicity of it being Mandy. It's her beautiful angelic voice on the intro. And she sent us in a recording of her experience getting a reading with Taylor.
I have had angel readings with Taylor before, and always I'm blown away time and time again. This was my first mediumship reading, and I didn't know exactly what to expect or who would come through. And I was left in awe and with so much peace in my heart. Taylor was able to accurately describe attributes and qualities of my past loved ones, physical things about them, things she would have absolutely no way of knowing. I mean, no way. The messages that were passed along, which were also not prompted by any questions as per Taylor's practice, felt like direct answers to questions or worries I've had regarding some of my relatives in those situations. I am so grateful for this reading. It was absolutely incredible and mind-blowing and beautiful. Thank you, Taylor, for sharing your beautiful gifts.
Oh, I love you, Mandy. That was so sweet. And, I love it too because mediumship is a different type of connection than angel readings because I know Mandy personally and I've known Mandy for years. I mean, she's your best friend. So I've been around her a lot and I love Mandy. So sometimes that knowing of someone can be difficult when it comes to reading for them because it's like what's what I already know and what is actually spirit. But that's why the mediumship was so fun with Mandy, because I don't know about any of her grandparents or people on the other side or anything like that. So it was really beautiful to get to connect with her in that way.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, she shared with me after the reading. It was just so lit up. And I know a lot about her family. So it was cool to hear the things that came through. And you just so accurately described relationships and dynamics in ways that you couldn't possibly have known, and just gave like a lot of comfort for her. And I think also her mom, she shared it with her mom. And Yeah, it's just such a comforting, amazing idea that we could be in contact with people we've lost and hear from them in this way of like deeper healing. It's just so cool.
Thank you. So I hope to connect with one of you guys soon if you enter the giveaway. The next giveaway will happen when we hit 222 5-star reviews on both Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Right now we're at like 245 or something on Spotify. So we're way past that. And the Apple Podcast people, we got to pick it up, guys. Spotify is winning the race by a lot. So if you listen on Apple Podcasts, the 5-star review means a lot. And I know that your loved ones in spirit and your angelic guides will orchestrate us meeting exactly when the time is right. And if you want an angels and ancestor reading in general, you can go to angelsandamethyst.com and join the waitlist there. This kind of segues into a rare book that I found. And something I want to do in this second year of Magic Hour podcast is more witchy book suggestions. One is like a personal book that it's not that I'm not recommending it to you guys, but it's a rare text. So you can't really find it. So this isn't my book recommendation yet, but I will be sharing what I learned from this book with you guys on the pod. And so this book is called On the Side of Angels, and it's the authorized life story of a really special medium named Gordon Higginson. And I'm really early on in it, but basically I just got this message. So when I studied at Arthur Findlay College, I studied under Eileen Davies and she studied under Gordon Higginson. And Gordon was like the president of the Spiritualist Church in like Union for a really long time. He was a world renowned medium, as was his mom. And I believe her name was Fanny. They were just like at this level of like names, addresses, like crazy detailed information. And that's the same nature of what I saw Eileen Davies do when I saw her demonstrate. It was insane. And I've never seen that level of evidence. And I find it's so inspiring to see what's possible. Like I've only touched the tip of the iceberg of like where this development can go. And so I got this feeling because something that I'm working on is a workshop that I eventually want to launch that has been percolating in the back of my mind about helping spiritually gifted kids. And Gordon Higginson is an example of that. So basically, like his mom was, I think, 14 when she went to this spiritualist church. And a medium there named Annie Britton told her, like, you're going to have a son who is going to be a famous medium, and you guys are going to have 100 years between the two of you of servicing this church. And so basically, she ended up having I think 4 kids, 3 boys, and the first 2 boys had no predisposition for mediumship, didn't show any qualities, so she was like, "I don't get it." And then she got pregnant with Gordon many years later as an unexpected pregnancy, and he's just like this prolific medium. So everything came true, and so I was reading this book and, like, starting to get into it, and this book got recommended to me by my guides basically because it's talking about a child who developed from childhood and what that looks like. And that wasn't my personal experience. So it's all tied into like where my consciousness is being primed as part of this workshop development. But it's like two birds with one stone because I'm reading about the caliber of evidence is insane. There's a story of his great aunt, who is the one that got his mom into the spiritualist community and took her to that first place where she got that prophecy, the church. And so that woman's name is Mrs. Taylor, which is really funny, a really funny synchronicity. And so he talks about going to see his great aunt, Mrs. Taylor, do a demonstration, and she would have crowds out the door waiting to see her. And so she was demonstrating in this like upstairs parlor place, and there were people all along the stairs craning to listen, hoping to get a connection. And she was doing platform, which basically means like demonstrating for a lot of people and seeing who comes through, kind of like what Tyler Henry does when he like sells out big crowds. So she was like, okay, there is a woman here in spirit, and she's telling me that there is a gentleman in the doorway who didn't come to see me, but he's sheltering from the rain in the doorway. He needs to come up here right now. She couldn't even see. So people go down, they find this guy who's like a little drunk and like sheltering in the doorway, and they bring him up to her. And she says, your wife is here who passed away. And she's saying that there's something in your pocket that you need to destroy right now. And first of all, the level of trust in the spirit world to just give that message, like she just went right to it. And that's something that's so inspirational about this book so far to me is just like the utmost trust in the spirit world. And so she's like, there's something you need to destroy in your pocket right now. And they like search him, which is kind of crazy in today's standards. And there was a bottle of poison, and he was going to kill himself that night. And his wife in spirit led him to this doorway, told the medium he was down there, got him dragged up there, and he destroyed the poison and started sobbing and saying that he couldn't live without her and that he was going to end his own life. And that story gave me such full body chills because, first of all, story after story in this book is insane, but like the level of evidence, and I think our connection with distractions and social media and everything, it hinders our ability. But back then, there was way less distractions and way more sitting in silence. And I think the level when you fully dedicate a lot of time to this development is really insane where it can go.
Wow, that brought me to tears. That is so incredible and like beautiful and magical and just, oh, wow. That's amazing.
I know. And he's also talking about in the book that he got drafted into World War II and he had to take a break from being a medium. So I think he started as a developing medium at 4 years old. He would sit in his mom's mediumship circles and he wasn't allowed to like speak or give messages, I think, until he was 8. But those first 4 years, he just sat and observed and like met his spirit guides and stuff. So by the time he was, I think, 21, it was World War II and he had to serve in World War II. And he said that like it was so gnarly being a medium in World War II, especially to his level, because he would know like, oh, this person in our platoon passed. He's standing right here. And everything he said would be verified. But what was so interesting too, first of all, it filled me with a lot of pride because they, on their badges, they had their name and their religion, which is really interesting. And he fought to have spiritualist on his little tag, which I just thought was such a sweet, endearing side note. But he was saying that he felt divinely protected by the spirit world through the war because they knew he had more work to do on earth. And there was like all of these kind of things where his team would work with him a lot through trance and he would go to sleep, like almost have this like I can't stay awake feeling. And then something would get bombed where he would have been. And then he like wakes up and it's like, oh my God, I was about to be right there. Like things like that would happen. Or that he was talking about how he felt this really strong urge to like go get a drink of water. And when he came back from the drinking fountain, like where he just was bombed, like stuff like that. And so he was like really describing how, in some ways, that journey of being a soldier and a medium developed his trust in the spirit world more and developed his mediumship more. And that there were like 40 to 50 men that would just come to him and he would tell them about their past loved ones and give them evidence and give them information. And it made his platoon way less afraid to die. And so there were just like such cool stories in that. Like one of them is how his spirit guide led them through this river when the bridge exploded and they were trapped on this place and they had to cross river that was like really treacherous, but he found like the exact path they could take because his spirit guide was leading them. Like the fusion of real life applications of working with spirit guides and such life and death stakes was so mind blowing to me. And I'm only like 40 pages into this book.
Oh my God. It's a bummer that it's so rare to find.
That's the other thing that's crazy. So I looked into getting this book on the side of angels and I went to the Spiritualist Naturalist Union website and it was like £3 is the price for it, but it was out of print and sold out. So I was like, okay, maybe I can find it online. It's like a $650 book. And so I was like so bummed because I was like, I think 650 is like a little crazy, even though I'm being guided to this. And I found it for like 180 somewhere. And I was like, you know what? This is going to be my Yuletide present to myself. I got it around that time of year. And that was the only copy that was not in the 600 to 700 range, like on all of the internet and all of the bookstore websites. It's crazy.
That's so wild. I'm always so curious what happens with publishers and why things stop being published. It's clearly in demand if people are paying that price for it. That's really cool, though. My mind is blown.
Yeah, so I'll continue to share with you guys because it's almost like, and I don't want to affirm this, but it's somehow like each generation seems like the evidence goes down or like the standard that we hold ourselves to goes down. Even in my mediumship readings, I'll say like, okay, I have a grandma here. It's your dad's mom. She's showing me dementia. She's showing me this. And people will like start to add information. And it's like, no, don't do that. Let me tell you. And it's almost like what we accept as a society for our spiritual messages. We're like, we want that connection so much. And it's been so sanitized out that we accept way less than is actually possible. And I don't think that does a service to the spirit world or us, because I think the level of evidence and magic, like my mind is so being expanded by this book right now about what's possible.
Yeah, I feel like it goes back to like our belief in what's possible. And like you said, it's been so sanitized out that it's like we're having a hard time even believing that it's possible that you could connect. So we get a morsel and we're like, that's all we can expect. And I think that's almost like a bigger lesson, certainly for me, but for like all of us, it's like stop expecting less than what you are hoping for. Stop accepting less than what you're hoping for. There's this beautiful card in one of my decks and it says, expect nothing less than your most precious dreams. And I feel like that's such a powerful thing. Like, let's raise our expectations of what's possible, both in our spirituality and in ourselves and in our relationships. Like, we don't need to settle for less. There is so much more than we're even realizing. Let's open ourselves to that possibility.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And so I think, you know, the spirit world and our spirit guides and our angels, they work in very layered, beautiful ways, especially when you go back and like re-listen or reread a reading that you did on yourself, or you're like, oh my gosh, that makes even more sense now. And so I think this book, like, there's a lot of layers to the reasons why I'm connecting with it now, especially because he was a trance medium. And that's something that I want to start to develop. And he talks a lot about that in the book. So I think there's like a lot of layers. And one of them, I think, is that feeling of don't settle for less. Even me personally, it's like, no, I'll never be done developing. I can always get better. First of all, I'm like literally have only been developing since like 2023. So it's not like I'm like super far on my path anyway, but like never stop developing. There's always further you can go. And it's just really inspiring to me and also humbling to me as a medium.
Yeah, it's just really cool, really mind blowing.
Yeah, so awesome. Okay, so the last thing I want to say before we get into the listener questions is my first book recommendation. So that was just a story about a book, but now is my actual book recommendations. It is The Witches of El Paso by Luis. I am so sorry if I butcher this, but it's Jaramillo. It's such an amazing book. And basically, it takes place with this family of women where a couple of the members have the site, La Vista. And basically, one family member travels back in time through her power, like jumps timelines, and she's in the 1500s in El Paso. And then another family member is in modern day El Paso. And it's like a beautiful, amazing story of family, magic, womanhood, witchcraft. And what's really cool about this book, first of all, it's so poetic, it's so beautifully written. The way the environment is built is so incredible, but also it's a system of magic unlike anything I've ever read in a book. Sometimes things in the fantasy genre can kind of seem like rinse and repeat vibes, and this was so original and really beautiful. And it was interesting to see another cultural viewpoint with magic because it very much fused like El Paso when it was America versus El Paso when it was Mexico and all of the different history. And it was just really cool. So I highly recommend that book. And if you guys have witchy book recommendations, it can be anything in the spiritual world, in the self help world, in the fiction world, in the historical fiction. Like, you know, The Mists of Avalon is a book I talk about a lot. So send them in to contact@magichourpod.com. I want to feature one really good book a month.
I am definitely going to read that book. It's so up my alley. I like exclusively read magical fiction. Like, that's all I want.
Literally same. And actually, a piece of good news, Ari was sending me something on Instagram saying that Barnes& and Noble is going to start expanding their stores because people are getting back into reading, because I guess Book Talk has had such a good influence on readers and getting people back into it. So yeah, this book isn't super famous in the literary witchy world, I feel. There's like so many books that get the same attention in the fantasy world like all the time, and this one wasn't. And I saw it randomly at the airport on my way to London over Christmas. So I was like, I need this. And it just turned out I really did. It's such a good book and it will just hook you right in.
Yay. I can't wait.
Okay, let's go into the listener questions.
We have so many good ones. Please keep sending them in. Contact@magichourpod.com. We love receiving all of your emails. Even if it's not a question or a story, some people have just been messaging me, sharing beautiful thoughts and questions and ideas. And it's just so wonderful. Okay, our first question is from Olaya. I hope I said that right. I've been hearing a lot lately about demons and jinn and entities and possession. A friend asked me if I believe in angels, and if so, why wouldn't I believe also in demons or jinn? So, yeah, I'm curious to know what you believe about that, and also if it's important to protect ourselves from entities and how to protect ourselves from them and how to clear the energy. Thank you, Olaya.
Thank you so much for this question. This is a really important question. And I want to first say that Kai Dickinson on her podcast, The Telepathy Tapes, ends the episodes with a quote that says, "To truly be a skeptic, you have to have an open mind." And so I feel like I'm a skeptic when it comes to demonic dark energies, but that doesn't mean I won't have an open mind. So I want to preface this with saying if somebody can send me proof of these things, I'm open to it. But this is from my experience. And I also know that different cultures around the world have different viewpoints about these types of topics. And I'm not trying to demean or put down anyone else's belief systems because I know more than a few different magical belief systems around the world have their own beliefs about this. So I'm speaking from my personal experience and I'm not trying to be derogatory in any way towards other belief systems. So that being said, I think that I want to start by saying that as a medium who has evidence of the spirit world and angels and connects to them every single day, I've never seen evidence of a negative demon or spirit. It has always been all love. And when I was the most afraid and scared was when I was not developed. When I was not developed, I perceived spirit as something scary and haunting. And when I was less developed was also a parallel point in time with when I was going through a lot of personal pain. And I think that that is like the true demon and lower vibrational stuff. It's us. So I'm going to start to build my case for this thesis now that spirit is all love. And I'm going to give a couple different points. That's the first point, that I think that mediums who are underdeveloped pick up on wounds and lower vibrational states of being and say you have a demonic entity attached to you, when in reality, it's like a wound that we're being asked to heal or look at or shine more light. So that's the first thing. I also think that, especially as someone who's highly clairsentient, when spirits step through to speak to me, how you were saying, Claire, that I described the dynamics between the different family members and stuff, I feel the pain. I feel the regret. I feel the sadness. And I think if I didn't understand what I was feeling, I would be like, oh no, you're in danger. There's something negative. I can clear it for you. Find the light, go to the light. So I think that, again, that's just part of maybe being a little more underdeveloped. My second point is that as humans, we are so egotistical in that we project our consciousness and the way that we are as humans onto the divine in literally every way. We only can understand the divine through our experience of humanity. We do it with God. We personify God all the time. We do it with our angels and guides. We're like, they're annoyed with us. They're frustrated with us. We project our humanity onto everything we can't understand. And so for us, it's like, well, if good and bad exists on earth and in humanity, then why wouldn't it exist in the spirit world? And that's thinking about it from a really limited perception of this human experience. And it's being in a physical body that creates the density that allows for those lower vibrational emotions. When we aren't in these denser, energetic, embodied states where we really feel things and process things and are also more vulnerable in these bodies, we're literally like just in this dream world almost in the spirit world where we can just be pure consciousness mixed with everything. And the truth of everything is love. It reminds me of this Marianne Williamson quote that I heard her saying the other day, which was like, the only truth that really exists between us is love. Everything else is wounds and misguided energy and, misunderstandings. But truly, the only real thing here is love. So, that being said, my second point, so now I'm on point 3, is that if you study near death experiences, they kind of all have common factors. Not one person in my experience of looking into this work has come back and been like, a demon chased me and lower vibrational entities were there and I had to protect myself. Most commonly, when people have near death experiences, it is I felt a sense of peace and weightlessness. I felt an unconditional sense of love. I felt like I was being like sucked through this tunnel into another realm. I saw family members that I hadn't seen for a long time. I had angelic presences guiding me to what's next. I was weightlessly observing and floating above the room, seeing myself. But it's not like, here's what I want for demons, the same evidence that I have for love. And I just don't have it. And when you read compilations of near death experiences, again, it's all love. So I think that there's also a big case for spiritual psychosis. And we program these fearful beliefs into our narrative based off of our need to freaking anthropomorphize everything about the spirit world. And if we weren't inundated with like horror movies and religious stories based in fear and hell and persecution, which, by the way, I don't know one person who had an NDE that was like, yeah, I was almost in hell, but luckily I came back. I've never heard of that. If we didn't have that same programming, our beliefs create our reality. And when we have a psychotic break from reality and our subconscious has been primed with imagery of possession and fear and things like that, I think that that is spiritual psychosis, not true demons outside of ourselves. And I think that that is very real and it can make it very tricky too. The other thing that I want to say too is that I'm not even quoting myself. Top mediums in the world, Eileen Davies, Tyler Henry, people who I really look up to. I mean, Gordon Higginson, people who are so amazing. Have you ever seen them get up there and be like, oh, okay, like I'm connecting with something really evil now and it's telling you all to go to hell, you stupid biatch? Like, that's never what the true people who can bring through real evidence from the spirit world have to say. That's the thing. It's like people who truly develop themselves, people who dedicate their lives to the spirit world and bringing through evidence. They're the people saying spirit is all love. It's not them who are like demons. And that isn't to say that it isn't good to have spiritual protections up and things like that, because I think that's more about our peace of mind. And I think it's about protecting our psyche and our subconscious of real threats about other people's negative energy here on earth. So I think that there is like a level of that. And I think there is a level of setting the intention for the messages for the highest good of all. You know, those things are really good and they help set the intention for sessions and for messages. And I think that that's really beautiful. But when it really comes to like demonic presences that can hurt us in the physical world, I don't see any proof of it. And it was really interesting because I had a client very far back in the day, long time ago, like one of my first clients. And I'm not going to go into too much information about her, but it was really interesting because she and I would have angel readings. This was before I started developing mediumship. And, you know, she would resonate and she was a regular client. And then she told me, like, hey, I found a teacher on YouTube who teaches a class about connecting with demons and dark magic. And I was like, I don't resonate with that at all. And I really don't recommend that you do that. And her life went down a dark road after that. Like, she stopped being a client of mine. She got addicted to drugs. She went through full spiritual psychosis. I don't even know where she is now. She reached out to me for money. It's like she went down such a dark path. And I think people who have the interest in dark magic and working with demons, it says way more about their unhealed trauma and perceived powerlessness in the world, that they feel the need to lash out onto some entity that will get them power or revenge or etc. I think it's like tapping more into our id or like the shadow side of our consciousness than anything external. And so some people would say, well, obviously she started working with demons and then she went down this crazy path. But I think that darkness already lived in her. And there was something that she just couldn't control within herself. And that led her down that path. It's a really interesting topic. And it's really unfortunate to me because I also think that demons And these things are also a topic used to scare us from our birthright of connection, which is really unfortunate and honestly breaks my heart as a medium because it's like such a convenient story to keep us scared and disconnected from such wisdom and truth that exists around us and within us.
Yeah, for sure. I really resonate with what you're saying. And obviously, I don't find myself to be someone as tapped in as you are. So I'm in even more like open minded skepticism about it all. And I think that's like such a healthy place to come from. But I just do really resonate with what you're saying. I feel like it's more about like our inner demons or the shadows that we are still operating with and through. I even had a friend years ago who saw somebody and said there was some sort of curse on her or whatever. And it's funny now looking back on it where I feel like, oh, I think that was just your stuff that you weren't looking at and not facing. And it can feel like a demon for sure. Like my inner villain sometimes definitely feels like a demon that lives inside of me that's really mean to me and can pull me under into kind of a perceived underworld. But I think that world exists within me. It's like, part of my humanness, my humanity is the juxtaposition between dark and light and love and fear and pain and loss and love and joy and all those complicated things that create what it is to be human. And so I think those are kind of the energies maybe that we tap into versus that existing in the spirit realm.
I could not agree more. And you talking about your inner villain voice makes me want to quote Marianne Williamson again. She was quoting A Course in Miracles, and she said, "The ego is at best suspicious, at worst vicious." And I thought that was such a good quote. I was like, I need to dive into The Course in Miracles. It seems really powerful, but so true. That's the real demon. It's like suspicious at best, vicious at worst, baby.
Yes. And it makes me think of like, Norse mythology or Greek mythology or like a lot of the old tales about the gods and all that stuff. Like, I always found those to be so obviously created by humans because they're all humans. Like, the way that they behave, they're petty and jealous and calculating and manipulative and egotistical. And it feels like that can't possibly be what like an all knowing, all powerful God would feel, but it sure is how we behave. And of course, in an effort to understand this like unknowable experience, we have described it in the only ways we know, which is us. And like we get petty, we get jealous. So, like, of course, we've created these ideas in our image. And I think, that's where all like horror movie stuff comes from, our own imaginations of fears. And so I think that it means that, like, in a way, a demon does exist because it's part of our stuff. And so if we look at it like that, like, I think hell exists when we create hell for ourselves. Like, when we choose to be in our stories and our stuff, and when we choose to look down at everything that's not working versus being in the vibration of gratitude and love, it's like we can easily create hell on earth for ourselves, and we often do. And we can create heaven on earth too. So it's like, I think those things are real, but maybe just not in the way that we're deciding they're real. And it's like, we can still work with those ideas, but not, I think, in this way of like, oh no, this demon from the other world might come and get me. It's like, no, this demon within yourself is rearing its head, and it's an invitation to heal yourself and choose joy.
Absolutely. And I think it was at the Council of Nicaea, might be quoting this wrong, where basically they took the Bible and they edited out everything that talked about Mary Magdalene. They took out Mary Magdalene's book. They took out the story of Thecla, I think. They took out the gospel of the people that spoke about Mary Magdalene. And I'm not fully up to date on all of the names and details, but they took this teaching that you're exactly saying of heaven and hell is real on earth, and it's all in our heart, and it's all our Jesus consciousness and Christ consciousness. And they took out so much of the important parts of the Bible to narrow it into this view of patriarchal fear-based control. And I think that's where demons really started as well. And that's not to say that they don't exist in other cultures and other religions as well, but a lot of major religions are really patriarchal and fear-based. But That being said, I think, and I've gotten this message a few times, that it's actually a more modern development for us to not be in contact with the spirit world. Like humanity has lived hand in hand with the spirit world for a long time. And I think that it was just a natural part of our gifts and our life to be in connection with the spirit world and to have gratitude and to be stewards of the land. And so I think religions like Christianity, as an example, that have distilled out everything to make us more fearful and have to just rely in blind faith and patriarchal. I think demons really are a manifestation, and people's obsession and fear with them is a manifestation and consequence of that. And sadly I see it all the time, like, are you speaking to loved ones or are you speaking to demons? And it's like, well, every single message comes from a place that's, as my mentor would say, hopeful, healing, or helpful. So, what's demonic about that? I think it's more demonic to try to scare people into this fearful place of staying small and disconnected from their birthright of connection to the infinite love around them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like that's almost been used as a tool to keep us small and afraid and tap more fully into the fear and literally create more demons within ourselves and between us. It's like that separation almost like turns others into demons, It's like in our minds. And it's like, yeah, this invitation instead to open up to our true birthright of connection and oneness and the awe of this like beautiful tapestry that we're all a piece of.
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting too, because I have this theory, speaking about our beliefs create our reality. I have this theory, and keep in mind, and I've said this on previous episodes, it's not your thoughts that create your reality. You can think about things and analyze things and think and work through complicated, deep, sad things that won't create a sad life. It's your deeply held beliefs that form the reality of your perception and your perception of reality. And so my belief is that, like, when people talk about ghosts, which is another like really scary thing with demons, people who don't believe in ghosts don't see ghosts. They're like, "No, ghosts don't exist," and they don't see them. People who believe in their whole heart that their house is haunted and that ghosts exist see ghosts all the time. So, I think that our beliefs prime our perceptions, and it's sort of like whatever you want to find in the world, you can, but that doesn't mean that it's the absolute truth. It's a really interesting, subjective, ineffable concept, but from my perspective, and from what I've seen with top mediums in the world, it's always messages of love and hope and healing from the other side.
I think it goes back to the whole reason we started this podcast. It's like what you focus on, you create more of in your life. So let's not focus on demons. Like let's focus on magic and love and joy and noticing those things in our life and creating more of those things in our life. And I think we will see that reflected in our experience.
I couldn't agree more. And let's go into another listener question or story.
Great. So we have a beautiful story that I really, really want to share. It was so lovely to receive this from Melissa. Hi, Taylor and Claire. I absolutely love the pod, and I'm so excited to share this story with you and hopefully the hummingbird community. It's what really made me believe in the magic of leaning into our spirituality and trusting the universe and our guides. A few years ago, my husband and I decided we were ready to start a family. Long story short, things did not go as we hoped they would. I had back to back miscarriages. They completely devastated us and ultimately led to a slew of testing, procedures, and ultimately to IVF. When all was said and done with our IVF cycle, we ended up with 4 embryos that were sent off to genetic testing. We knew the odds of all 4 testing normal were very slim and just prayed that we would even have one that we could transfer. We couldn't believe the news when we found out all 4 tested normal. It was the first time in a 2-year journey where we felt hopeful that things might work out for us. After finding out that we had 4 embryos, I started seeing the number 4 everywhere, repeating on billboards, on the license plates of passing cars, in commercials on TV, 444 on the clock nearly every single day. It was constant. It felt like the universe was telling us that everything was going to be okay, that 4 was a lucky number, and that our 4 babies were looking out for us. Well, we transferred one of the 4 embryos and it stuck. I was finally pregnant and everything was going well for the first time. I continued seeing the number 4 everywhere. A couple of weeks before my due date, I had to be induced because of high blood pressure. When my water broke, we were put into room number 4 in the labor and delivery ward. I was told to start pushing at 4:44 p.m. I gasped out loud when the nurse read the time on the clock and told me it was go time. And after our son was born, we were brought to room number 4 in the maternity ward for the rest of our hospital stay. My son will be a year old in March, and he is healthy, happy, and thriving. I still see the number 4 everywhere, especially in moments where I'm sitting in worry or when I start to think about the future and what it might be like to try for another baby. I like to think the synchronicities are the universe's way, or maybe even my son's siblings in spirit, both past and future, of easing my mind and telling me things will work out. Thank you for sharing my story. I hope maybe it will give someone listening the hope they need to keep going when things feel scary and impossible while trying to grow their own family. Love, Melissa.
I love this so much. Thank you so much for sharing this beautiful story. And what really just gives me chills and makes me so happy right now is that without knowing this story, I wore my 444 angel sweater today. So if you're watching this recording or if you're on YouTube, you'll see I'm in my I Am Protected 444 sweater. And that is a beautiful synchronicity that you can just add to the list, Melissa. Your angels are obviously very thorough. They're probably a bunch of Virgos up there, just seeing to all the little details.
Yes, I was already planning to choose this one. And then I saw your sweatshirt and I was like, okay, well, now we have to do it because love that synchronicity. And for me, lately, I've been seeing, I always see a lot of angel numbers, but the past couple of months, it's been 4, 4, 4, 4. And the meaning for me with my angels is I am protected, I am led.
That's literally what my sweatshirt says. I am protected 444, which by the way, this sweater was designed by me.
So there you go.
I love that. And yeah, 444 as an angel number is so much about foundations, protection, structures, all of those things. And I think also our angels and guides, they send us a lot of different signs, but when they know we recognize one of them, they're like, it's a go. She recognizes it. Like, keep sending it.
It's like we were talking about, like sometimes they can have these greater meanings, but then sometimes we can create the meanings with them so they know, oh, I need to let her know she's feeling protected, like send her a 444. Whatever we've ascribed to the symbols, like how white butterflies are a sign from your mom, you know that, she knows that. So then you guys can communicate in that way.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. It's like the more specific we get with them, the more opportunity for magic they have. And like I've said before, synchronicity is their form of creating art on earth. And so I think like when we say stuff like send us any sign, it's less powerful than 4 eggs, room 4, giving birth at 444. It's like so specific. And that's what makes it so extra magical.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love it. Thank you so much, Melissa. And let's see, jump into one more question. This is a question from Ellie. Hi, Taylor and Claire. Love the podcast, and I've been learning so much. I'm a Cancer sun, Taurus moon, and Libra rising. I think I've always had strong intuition and am trying to connect with and learn more about using and trusting my intuition. Listening to Taylor talk about angels and clairs, I am reminded that when I was a child, I had imaginary friends. But for me, it was always a group of people and always felt a sense of supportive helpfulness from them. I even remember having conversations with them. Although I stopped seeing them as I got older, I can still recall what they looked like and how they made me feel. So here's my question. Could children's imaginary friends really be angels or spirits? Do we stop seeing or hearing from them as we get older because we're taught that they're not real? Thanks so much, Ellie.
I love this. Thank you so much for sending this in, Ellie. And I think something that's really beautiful about childhood memories of spiritual connection is to look at the clairs that seemed most open for you in childhood. And so you said you remember what they look like and what they felt like. So that's clairvoyance and clairsentience. So if you, first of all, go backwards, and this is for everybody, not just Ellie, and look at your childhood experiences. Like for me, feeling and knowing were so online. And that was hard because I couldn't see and I couldn't hear. So I didn't really understand in some ways, but I understood in others. So I think we all have different puzzle pieces. And so for you, again, that seeing and that feeling were two that seemed really on the surface. And those might be clairs that you can work with or access more easily as you start to remember on your development journey. So I think going backwards to what came most naturally to us is a really good tool into where we can go when we go onto our journey of remembering. So that's just a little side note. But 1,000,000%, I believe that childhood friends, like imaginary friends, are not imaginary. I think that we come into this world wide open. Claire and I spoke about this, I think, on the December listener questions episode about how Dr. Raymond Moody says that the brain is not the source of consciousness, it's a filter for consciousness. And when your brain is still developing, the filter is still wide open and it doesn't have the same judgments. It's interesting because this ties back to the demon question. It doesn't have the same conditioning of like demons could connect with me or fear. It's just open. And so then you can connect with grandma on the other side who you never got to meet or some sort of spirit guide. So I know my mom personally had two very imaginary friends named Annabelle and Cherry Bell that she told me about. And I think that all different types of energetic beings can come in as guides. I know for me, like I felt my angels when I was a kid. I felt them protecting me. There were times where I was like very ostracized socially and I was very bullied as a kid and I was very much in my own kind of world. And I would go out onto this lawn at our school and make big nests out of the dead grass and just lay in this like bird nest made out of the dead grass, looking up at the clouds for hours. I would just be like staring at shapes in the clouds. And I felt like I was surrounded by like angelic beings. And so I think that for sure, these experiences that we have in childhood when we feel wide open and the filters are not like skewing our perception of reality through a limited lens that it perceives that we need to survive. I think it's really beautiful the way that we can connect with spirit people and different types of energetic beings. And I think it even goes back to how I don't believe any children think their imaginary friends are demonic either. So I just want to make that connection because that keeps coming up.
Yeah, that's so true. I heard about this study and I'm going to butcher some of the details, but basically they were trying to look at like genius level creativity and they tested children of a certain age and it was like 92% of the children came back as like genius level creatives. And then they tested a bunch of adults or maybe they did this over years and tested the kids again. I'm vague on the details, but the number dropped like crazy. Then it was like 8% or something. Again, these details are wrong, but it just was like speaking to this idea of like how wide open we are when we're younger and then how society like builds all these like fears and blocks and self-consciousness afterwards that kinds of like disconnects us from our creativity, our birthright, our wonder, our imagination, and I think our connection to spirit. So I think like connecting back to those experiences now as an adult with even more wonder is so magical. So I absolutely love that you're making that connection of like, oh, those were maybe not just in my imagination, those were like me connecting to the spirit realm or to my higher self or my ancestors, maybe in a way that as a child I just took as like, playthings or friends. And of course, like our spirit guides and ancestors are our friends. They're our like biggest support.
Absolutely. That's so true. It's like we think about it and they're no different than the relationships that we have here in the physical world. Like sometimes we think about our angels and our guides as this aloof force that exists so far away from us, when in reality, they can be our friends. They can be as close to us as we connect with them and meet them halfway and invite them in and have space for them. And I think in childhood, that just comes more naturally. But like with any relationship, it takes time and consistency and trust. So that's really beautiful. And I also wanted to say that imagination is the sister language of intuition. And that's the reason why when I go into readings, the less I know about you, the better. Because our imagination wants to fill in the blanks and wants to create answers and things like that. But also, the way spirit connects with us and communicates with us is through our imagination. That's why it's such a gray area. And the less you know, the better, because it's like the images, the sounds, the things like that. It uses our imagination muscles to create the images, the stimuli. Like that's the muscle that's helping work to connect and bring the spiritual information through. So I also think that there's a big correlation with what you were saying, Claire, about how these children are like creative savants, and how they're also then have such a strong muscle for the spirit world to come through. Because I think like what happens to both imagination and intuition is our inner critic voice starts to develop as the brain starts to develop. And it starts to say that's impossible. It kind of goes back to that quote of the ego is suspicious at best, vicious at worst. And it's like that suspicion starts to come in as the ego develops, and we're less connected to just that pure consciousness that we come in with, and we start to filter ourselves through the story that we're telling ourselves about who we are as we grow up. That gets more and more defined, and our imaginative and creative processes start to decline because we fear judgment. We think that it's stupid. We think we're not good enough. We have imposter syndrome. And that also is the same exact force that dims our spiritual connection. It thinks this couldn't be right. I don't think I'm supported. I don't think I'm accurate. Like, I don't trust the message enough to give it. There's all of that. It's really tied with imagination and intuition. That inner critic voice really dims them both.
Yeah, it's so true. It's like we lose our sense of play as we get older, and we're almost told, like, hey, that's for kids. Like, playing isn't for adults, and like, there's no time to play. Like, we must work and we must be focused. And I love how you always talk about approaching this work with playful curiosity. And I'm in a place in my life where myself and my community have really been embracing this idea of like, oh, like play is where it's at. Like, we need to be in play as much as possible in whatever way we can with each other, in relationships, with the world, with our creativity, with our work. It's like there's such a opening when we approach it from play instead of this like heavy adult mentality of like what should be done and what is and isn't possible. It's like play opens us up to the wonder of like anything is possible.
So true. It's so true. And I think we all need more play, and that play and imaginative work only strengthens our intuitive work too. It's like nothing exists on an island. As we heal or strengthen one area of ourself, it contributes to the rest. So, thank you so much for this really fun question, because I think imaginary friends and all of those things, they're so interesting, and it's interesting how quickly we as a collective society dismiss things like this. Like, dismiss what children have to say. So, such an interesting topic. And it's just very interesting to see how much, when you look backwards spiritually, was right there, but we just didn't understand what it was yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, children come in so tapped in, and then we kind of dismiss them as like not knowing about the world. But it's like maybe they're not knowing about the world allows them to fully know the reality of this stuff, you know?
And that's what's so beautiful about the modern witch's journey that I talk about. If you haven't taken the witch wound workshop, I highly recommend it. But I talk about the modern witch's journey, not in a linear way like the hero's journey, but in a way of a series of Venn diagrams that create almost a flower shape. And it starts as the wild witchling of childhood, which is coming in just completely tapped in and wild, and wanting to make potions with sticks and rainwater, and wanting to speak special languages, and making magic in the backyard, and being in nature, and being messy and connected to the elements. And we basically go through the whole progress. But the last phase is the wise one, which is where you are in your wisdom and you're in your kind of crone era. And it doesn't have to be like literal age wise crone, but you're in this consciousness of like complete wisdom and faith and reconnection. And the two, the wild witchling of childhood and the wise one, they bleed into each other within this Venn diagram, meaning they can both learn from each other, sort of similar to how Aries and Pisces and the zodiac learn from each other. Like, every consciousness can learn from the next. And Aries is this like new baby, pure soul consciousness. And Pisces is this old soul, has been through the whole zodiac, has learned so many lessons, is at this spiritual place, and it has so much to learn from the simplicity, the bravery, and the leaps of faith of Aries energy. So I think that, kids have so much to teach the wise ones as well.
That's such a beautiful way to look at life and look at our growth. It's like, it's not linear. We can learn so much from each other, and I just love how it's a cycle and that the wise one learns so much from the youngling.
Yeah. And speaking about the modern witch's journey, in honor of this being the 1 year anniversary of Magic Hour, I just want to shout out a couple episodes. So I've been asking you guys on Instagram, like, what are your favorite episodes? And episode 103, which is Healing the Witch Wound, keeps coming up time and time again. So I just want to shout out a couple like listener favorite episodes that if you're just finding the podcast now and you're overwhelmed on the sheer amount of content, maybe these are a couple episodes to check out if you haven't yet. So, episode 103, Healing the Witch Wound and the Modern Witch's Journey, is one of the episodes by far that you guys say, like, really resonated with you and helped you so much. And then my whole Arthur Finley College series as well. That's episode 114, 115, 120, and 127. Those are the episodes that are the 4-part series about my time at Arthur Finley College. There are about 7 to 8 students that I know of who have actually gone to Arthur Finley College because of the podcast. I'm sure there's more that I don't know of. And the feedback has been so exciting. I love to talk about it with you guys. So that's definitely a series of episodes that I highly, highly recommend. And then I also get a lot of feedback about our Spirit Baby episode with Emily the Medium as well. People seem to really love that one. And that is episode 113. So those are some good ones to go back on and, see if they resonate with you and check in on. And those have been episodes that the hummingbirds have really loved.
Yes, those are definitely favorites of mine. I mean, it's so hard to choose. There's so many good ones, but those are good ones to start with if you're feeling overwhelmed.
Absolutely. And if you haven't listened to episode 101, welcome to Magic Hour, and you're new to the podcast, I really recommend that too, because it's just a great place to start about my journey and how I got where I am and getting a better feel for me and my work. So love it. And it's just such an honor to be doing this and to enter into our second year. It's just so, so special. So thank you all so much for being here, for helping the podcast grow. And let's transition into our first Sitting with Spirit of the new year for Magic Hour. With the 1 year anniversary of Magic Hour podcast at hand, I'm really reflecting on all of the gratitude and the growth that this podcast has experienced in its first year. And I'm also getting really clear on where I could use some support for the community. When you start a podcast, I don't think you realize everything that goes into it. And I pour a lot of time, love, magic, and also money into this podcast. We don't yet have sponsors, and those sponsors really help sustain the podcast. So, right now, any way that the community can support the podcast is so appreciated, whether it's through sharing us on social media, leaving your 5-star reviews, telling like minded magical people about it, even joining Earth Angel Club or buying one of my workshops. If you've been on the fence to do that or check those out, it really helps support the pod, and it's so, so appreciated. I have the Be Your Own Angelic Intuitive workshop. I have the Working with Your Angels to Attract a Soulmate connection. And I also have the Healing the Witch Wound workshop. And code 333 gives you $33 off of each. You can find them on angelsandamethyst.com. And it's just so appreciated. Of course, getting a reading helps support the podcast, but those things, the workshops and Earth Angel Club, also really help. So thank you so much for all of the love of the hummingbird community, and may we continue to grow and spread the magic together. Welcome to Sitting with Spirit, my loves. This is the part of the podcast where I sit with our angels and our guides, and I give the messages that will support the collective. Take what resonates with you, leave the rest. So, we are firmly in eclipse season right now. Not of time of recording, but I know that this is coming out right before the Aries new moon eclipse. And so, to me, as I was starting to tune into the energy of this week, it feels like momentum is building to a crescendo. The energy just feels almost like when you're at a roller coaster and you're like boop, 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 going up, up, up until you reach the top. That's how it feels. Like we're climbing, 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 and reaching a crescendo. And so it feels like a lot of the seeds that have been planted, like from the time of the Pisces new moon onwards, are starting to build and sprout and grow and sort of pop off at this moment. It feels big energetically this week. And I know that there's a lot of narratives around eclipse season and around any major astrological time that can be very fearful because change, which eclipse season evokes, can scare us. The unknown can scare us. And the message that I get is that there's a lot of potential for magic and joy and up level too, and to not let fear like drag you down. And so often when we talk about eclipse season, we're like, surrender, surrender, surrender. But I think maybe a more accurate word would be flow, because it's not that we're not engaging in our life. It's that we're not trying to force things to happen. Instead, we are flowing with where the energy is taking us. And that is true surrender. So, even if I was actually thinking about this before, that some of the best psychic and intuitive messages are the ones that don't make sense to our brain. And that's how you know that it's not your brain making it up. It's something that you couldn't have known. So, that's kind of what I mean by flow, too. It's like, you might think you have to move forward in this linear way, but maybe the energy is pushing you more to consider something else, bringing something else to your consciousness, opening a door in a different area, or conversely saying this needs to go and this door is shutting, but then it's like pounding on the door and trying to get it open and trying to find a key to open that door. That's not surrender. That's not flow. Flow would say, okay, I see this closing. I'm going to do my own personal work around that. I'm going to flow with what wants to come next. It's like that's the energy right now, is this sort of fever pitch, heightening, elevated energy that's pushing us. And our angels and guides are working so overtime to direct our consciousness and to get our attention. And all we have to do is surrender to it. And that surrender looks like allowing, not forcing, flowing, not forcing. It just feels really exciting. And as I was tuning into this, there was almost a little bit of a frantic element to the energy, too. It feels like things this week might feel kind of rushed or impulsive or just kind of frenetic in this way. And so I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that it might give us the momentum and the push to move forward in the ways we need to, but just stay intentional and just take time to ground, check in with yourself, and to make sure you're not letting the energy sweep you up in its intensity, but staying purposeful, intentional, and trying to marry what your physical body needs with what your energetic body needs. So, a symbol that I saw around this week was a lotus flower coming into bloom. And I felt so much excitement when I saw that. And lotus flower is such a beautiful flower plant guide because it's really tied to spiritual evolution, spiritual awakening, and unfolding as our highest self. And so this really feels like a moment where we are coming into this blossom, and it's just asking us to tune into like the excitement, the spiritual evolution. I just feel like there's a level of like rewards for the hard work that we've been doing on ourselves. And so I just wanted to say, as you have again planted these seeds during the Pisces new moon, I see the fruit starting to bear now, and it just feels really exciting. Like, as that lotus flower blooms into the next level of evolution, what resonates with us, where we're going, what life looks like is going to start to change and blossom as well. So, that being said, as we enter a new level of bloom, it is very normal for, in proportion to that, a next level of self doubt, shadow, and nervous system rewiring to come up with that. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm in this next level of bloom. I see the potential, I see the opportunity, and now I'm starting to doubt myself. Like, I've arrived here, I know what the homework assignment is, I know how to move forward. And now, in parallel, in tandem with that, is the shadow work that's trying to keep us in an uncomfortable comfort zone. So I always say that self doubt is a good thing because it means that we're breaking out of a comfort zone. And it's a really exciting moment. So don't see fear, self doubt, shadow, anxiety as a messenger being like, you're not ready for this. You're not good enough. This isn't safe. That's the lie that those emotions are telling. Instead, take it as there's a deeper layer of healing, stepping into worthiness, stepping into presence, stepping into power that is available to me right now. And that is a part of the lotus flower coming into deeper bloom. There's always a little bit of discomfort when we start to take up new energetic territory. And every single person feels that, from the person who's at the top of their game in this world, from the person who keeps themselves small. We're all dealing with that same inner villain voice. And it's just, how much are we going to believe it? Or how much are we just going to take it as an invitation to do deeper healing work on ourselves? And so, in that vein, I saw snake coming up as an animal guide. And snake is so tied to shedding of the outdated skin. And this is the year of the snake. And I think being in eclipse season really activates that year of the snake energy, where it's like shedding outdated skins, letting things go. But snake also has this goddess energy and this witch energy and this healer energy. So I think there's also such themes of healing ourselves so we can be a greater healing force in the world. I think there's such themes of healing the witch wound so we can show up more powerfully in the world, and that all of this like eclipse season magic is helping us peel back another layer so we can align with that. So, snake is such a beautiful animal guide that really signifies shedding the outdated, making space for the new. And snake can be very misunderstood. And so, I think that that's also a part of the healing, is like letting yourself be misunderstood. I think we've come into this place now where everybody thinks that everything has to be for them. Like on social media and online, like we're so connected all the time. And if we came here to all agree on everything all the time, we would have stayed in the spirit world. We came here to experience duality and differences. And it's okay. Like part of that snake medicine is really standing in your inconvenience, your messiness, your humanity, and not apologizing for it, not trying to stay small, not trying to appease everyone around you. And that's definitely a part of the healing of the witch wound as well. So, moving into the mediumship, I started connecting with a brother in spirit who showed me butterflies as one of his main signs. And I felt like he would have been very close with his sister. And I feel like this message is for a sister. And I feel like the brother and sister were almost like twins, but if they weren't twins, they would have been like twins, like born a year and a half apart, kind of look alike. Like they were always a unit, is the feeling that I got. And we're very close in age. I feel like he's been gone for about 5 or 6 years, that he passed very young. I got a J name with him. His energy felt very soft and very gentle to me and very empathetic. Like he was always taking into account the people around him and how they would feel, and that there was just a lot of consideration with him while he was here. I also felt him to be with a woman in spirit who felt like she was very protective over him and very matronly. So I feel like he joined a female relative over there who was like, I've got him. I saw sandy blonde hair. I saw some sort of heart and organ failure that I feel like he would have struggled with. I felt like he would have had sort of ongoing health stuff with his heart. And I want to say lungs too, like this whole kind of area. There was also an interesting sort of message here about him enjoying watching his sister's witchy journey. I was seeing a witch on a witch's broom flying in a witch's hat, and it almost looked like it was a Halloween decoration put up on a door. But he was using that to give me this feeling of like, I love to see you explore this stuff, and I love to co create with you in this space. So, this goes to his message for the collective, not just his sister, where there's a message here of like, invite your ancestors, loved ones in spirit to play games with you. Like he was showing me liking to hide her rings and liking to hide her jewelry. And it's funny because this has been coming up in my personal practice where instead of just like sitting in silence for 30 minutes, I ask my guides, like, make something pop in the room, make the walls crack. Like I ask them to make noises. It's so fun. And if we don't know what to ask for, we don't receive it. But all we have to do is ask for these types of things, just like we ask for a sign. So I feel like if you want to invite your past loved ones to play with you in some sort of way, like for me, it's creating sounds in the room. I know some mediums have light up cat toys that they like put around and then those can light up and start bouncing. It's like just creating little things and creating that space for play because it feels like for him, it's very fun on the other side. And then he had another message as well that felt very important. It's twofold. One is we do not take it personally on the other side if you are not ready to connect with us. There are some people where the grief is so strong that they don't feel ready to connect, or the relationship was so difficult and complicated that they also don't feel ready or have a desire to connect with someone on the other side. And the message here is like, we understand that, and you don't need to feel guilty about that. Like, we have a great understanding of it. And the second part of this message is we'll meet you with where you feel comfortable when it comes to connection, whether that's seeing us in a dream, whether that's getting a sign, whether that's us completely respecting your space and boundaries and just kind of watching from afar. We will meet you where you are ready to connect with us. And that's the feeling that I got almost is like, as this sister was going on her witchy journey, it's almost like I should be connecting with my brother more. But that just felt too heavy and intense. And he's acknowledging, like, we see the grief and we understand it. We don't take it personally if you can't connect with us or don't want to, even. We completely understand. So I think that's a really important message for the collective to know. Like for his sister, that's where like the playing a game comes in, where it's like, he finds sending synchronicities to her and hiding things like a game. And that's the level of connection that won't provoke grief in her. And he meets her there, and that's enough. So, whatever your parameter is and capacity is on your grieving journey, or just your ancestral healing journey, or what you know about your relatives, it's like, just because you can understand cerebrally that they're all love on the other side doesn't mean that maybe you want to talk to them particularly. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So, spirit will meet us where we are ready to hold them. Always, always, always. Claire, is there anything you want to say?
Yeah, I just love these messages. And as always, I felt they were deeply for me as well, particularly the angel message. It's been interesting. I'm, as I've mentioned on the pod before, on a healing journey and just trying to like work through some stuff. And it's been interesting to see how I've taken a few steps forwards. And then it feels like this past week, I've taken all these steps backwards, or like these shadows or inner monsters are like really rearing their head. And I think initially it felt like, oh no, I haven't made any progress. But hearing what you were saying just resonated so deeply. Like I feel like it is the progress that is creating this pushback from the old stories and old ideas. They're like, wait, 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 you believe this terrible thing, remember? And so I think it's like part of the healing that they're coming up to one last time be looked at or just really worked through. So it just gave me a lot of hope and comfort hearing that. And, I think in our healing journeys, we take steps forwards. And even when it feels like we're taking steps back, I think it's more just a different hard step forward, not a step back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really good point, that what progress really looks like is kind of different than what we've been told it looks like. And I feel like there's this sense on our healing journey of like, okay, it's been a couple weeks, I'm ready to move forward, or even it's been a year and I'm ready to move forward. But these deeply ingrained wounds and patterns and beliefs took years to integrate themselves into our psyche and our heart space. And you can never knock it all out in one fell swoop, because different things in the external world trigger different elements of that internal pain, and a trigger can like completely take you by surprise sometimes. So I think that that is really important. And like even just today in therapy, I was connecting with my inner child and she was like sobbing and I wanted to just make her okay. And I was like, it's okay, what do you need, what do you need? And she's like, why are you so afraid of sadness? Like, why are you so afraid to cry? This is what I need. I need to cry and I need to feel my feelings. We're always going right to like, how can I be okay externally? How can I stop crying? But it's like, exactly like you're saying, maybe the crying is what needs to happen so we can fully authentically move forward. Maybe these stories need to come up in a new way so we can fully authentically move forward. And so I think we've been so processed as a whole global society, humanity, where it's like the goal is stop the tears immediately, stop the uncomfortable emotion immediately. And so it's almost like on our healing journey, we only get doses of feeling the feelings, and it like elongates how long the healing journey takes. And so I think that it's really healthy to feel those deeper feelings. And it's part of the duality that allows us to fully enjoy our life, because we are doing that work.
Yeah, exactly. There's been a lot of shame that's come up for me around the feelings and just uncovering too how often I feel like I've been told it's too much, and that it shouldn't be. And the guilt of feeling like I have beautiful things in my life, I should be happy. But I think that is a denial of the fullness of this experience. And sadness is also tied into like deep love. And so, I think when we can recognize that, we can hold space for our sadness in a way that doesn't make it wrong, but just makes it a part of this beautiful tapestry that is the complicated experience of being human.
Yeah, and your soul chose to come in here with the moon in Pisces, you know? It's like deep feeling was an experience that your soul chose for a reason, and turning that tap off to make other people more comfortable, it's like that isn't fair to you and what your soul came here to experience either, and the right people will never feel like that's too much.
I love that. Thank you. It's true and it's important to remind yourself of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so progress is not linear. It's truly a deep spiral dance that we're constantly participating in. And I think even this idea of my inner child sobbing and being like, why are you trying to get me to stop? Like, this is what I need right now. I need to cry. I think that it's interesting when we feel shame or discomfort around emotions that are heavy, tracing back, like, where was I taught that? Where did I internalize that? Where was that modeled for me? And I think that might be part of why these emotions keep coming up is for us to meet them in a new way or to uncover something new about them. So I think as the lotus flower blossoms, it just makes sense that the shadow comes up in proportion because we're ready to face it now.
That's such a perfect way to look at it. Instead of saying like, "Oh no, here comes my shadow again. I thought I healed this." It's like, "No, this is in direct proportion to the healing work I'm doing."
And it's sort of like how we don't take things personally. Like we try our best not to take things personally about other people's opinions and things like that. It's like a reflection of them sometimes more than us. It's almost like putting that same principle onto our healing journey of not taking it as a reflection of who we are when those shadows come up, not taking it personally when those shadows come up, but realizing, oh, okay, this is something that I can be the observer of. I'm not like guilty of anything. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm observing this, taking the information and not taking it as a personal part of the story I tell myself about who I am. It's more a projection of like inner child pain, ancestral stuff, societal stuff, just like everything is a projection. And I think when we can take our ego out of it in terms of assimilating it into the story we tell ourselves about who we are, it also might bring less judgment to our healing journey and more just, again, flowing with what is. Like I was talking about in the beginning, it's like this moment is surrender. Surrender doesn't equal static. Surrender equals flowing with what's coming up and where our consciousness is leading us right now and not fighting against that current.
That's so true. I think sometimes surrender can seem like giving up, but surrender is choosing to be in flow. And we get such benefits when we choose to do that versus like fighting upstream or resisting. And I just love what you said about not attaching to the story of our wounds. It's like, if you see a child that's being mistreated, you wouldn't judge that child for feeling wounded by that. But somehow we judge ourselves for having these wounds that, like you said, took years to implant in our psyche and aren't our fault that they're here, but now we have an invitation to relate to them differently now that we're aware of them.
Yeah, and we can hold ourselves in the ways that maybe we needed to be held and didn't have the opportunity to when we were younger, too. And that's just so powerful. And like anything, it gets easier as you go because you start to be like, oh, I've been here before. I've been in this triggered spot before. I've been in this low before, and I know what to do now. And I think a big part of it is that surrender piece that we keep talking about. Surrender doesn't mean I surrender the battle, like I lose. That's not what surrender means. Surrender means I lay down my sword and I meet this trigger and test and pain with complete open arms, curiosity, love, patience, self acceptance. That is so important. Just laying down the part of us that wants to dismiss it, talk over it, love and light over it, mantra over it, and instead just surrender to feeling it, because that might be the exact thing your angels and guides are leading your consciousness through, so you can get the message. So there is room for something new to come in, so that you are seeing things in a new way that opens up other pathways. And the more we're like, no, 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 it gives me this image of trying to feed kids their vegetables like little babies. You have to be like, vroom, vroom, like pretending a little airplane's going in their mouth. And they're like, no, no, no. And like, that's how I see our angels and guides bringing up deeper shadow. It's like, we don't want that. We don't want that. It's like, yeah, but eat your vegetables. Like, your shadow work are the vegetables. You'll get the dessert after your vegetables. And it's almost like they're trying to gently spoon feed us our vegetables. And we're like, no, no, no.
That's hilarious and feels so true.
Right? They're like, we know what's good for you, sometimes more than you know what's good for you. Just eat your vegetables. And we're like, we don't want to. We want to skip right to dessert.
And that's me. That's classic me.
I know. Well, amazing. I hope these messages are helpful. I hope you all have a beautiful Aries new moon eclipse, and we will see you next week.
For more information on Taylor and her work, go to angelsandamethyst.com or connect with her on Instagram at angels_and_amethyst. She is the one verified account with this name and will never DM you for a reading. If you have any questions about intuition, spirituality, angels, or anything and everything magical, please email contact@magichourpod.com. We will answer listener questions once a month in our solo episodes. Are you an aligned business owner that would like to advertise to our beautiful hummingbird community? Please email contact@magichourpod.com. Make sure you're subscribing to Magic Hour so you never miss the magic. And don't forget to leave us 5 sparkling star reviews. They help more magical people find the pod. Please screenshot and email your 5-star reviews to contact@magichourpod.com, and we'll send you a free downloadable angelic meditation and enter you to win an angel reading with Taylor Page. If you review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, we'll add your name twice. And if you share the podcast on your Instagram story and tag us, we'll add your name a 3rd time. The next giveaway will happen when we hit 222 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Thank you for listening to Magic Hour with Taylor Page. Remember, you are magic.